from the glory of God's high story.
Hello and welcome to another episode of God-Sized Stories. This week, our guest is Audra. Audra, tell us about yourself.
Hey everybody, I live in Bristol, Wisconsin. I am currently a Sunday school teacher for very rambunctious kindergarten first graders that are always moving.
As young kids always do. So Audra, you and I were talking a little bit earlier, and you would say kind of like the theme of your life would be this idea of temporary home. Can you explain what that means?
I think like the kindergarten first graders, I was always moving through life and still am. I was born in Virginia and lived in various parts of Virginia and moved to Maryland, North Carolina, Illinois, outside of Springfield, New Mexico at one point, and also now Wisconsin. And it's just, moving is just, it's always been that temporary home. It's always keeps going and going. And it was really hard at first because my first big move when I was really aware was after I just finished 6th grade and moved to New Mexico with my family. And I was pretty much taken out of this environment where I had a church home that I loved, grew up in, was baptized, and I was just so lost and so sad. And most of my family knew about it. So they're like, oh, what are we going to do? And then we moved back to Virginia a year later, just went through life and was very secluded in my life. I didn't really want to deal with people. I kind of had the college experience of moving away and not really knowing how to adjust anymore. And then we moved to Wisconsin, and I ended up, we were looking for a church. We hadn't had a church home for probably about 4 years, and found the church where I'm now a Sunday school teacher, and it felt so good. It felt that finally, even though every place is a temporary home, including this right now, I had somewhere that I belonged. And that when you always go back to the place where you know God's moving, you know you're sort of on a good path. And I think each temporary home, each place I've been in, has taught me something.
Nice. So, like, what would be then the biggest thing out of all of it? Because obviously you just said you learned a little bit at each place, but from this idea of always be moving, always have these temporary homes, what would be the big thing that you learned from all of that?
You lean on God the most in the hardest times. And sometimes when things are going really good, you're not as devoted. You're not as willing to set aside yourself. When things are hard, you're just like, God, take care of it. God, give me strength. I don't have enough knowledge. Please help me to understand, make my path straight. Like Proverbs talks about in chapter 3. It's God will see you through. One of the things that we talked about a little earlier was there's this charm on my bracelet that I've had through pretty much every move, everything I've been through in my life, and it's footprints. And my mother and I just went over this poem, and it was Footprints in the Sand. And the story goes that a man was walking along a beach with God, and there were 2 sets of footprints, and he looked back, and he saw during one of the hardest moments of his life, there was only 1 set of footprints. He asked God, he said, hey, you're supposed to be there for me. Why are there only 1 set of footprints? Why did you leave me all alone during the hardest time in my life? And God said quietly to him, I carried you through. And through each move, through each temporary home, I realized that God's got me, and there's a permanent home in heaven with him.
End of that. Well, Audra, thank you so much for sharing all that. I wanna just ask a fun, silly question real quick. You have this passion, this heart for Sunday school. Where do you think that came from?
It goes back generations, actually. My mom was Sunday school teacher at the church home that I had 7-8 years of kindergarten through 6th grade. She was teaching and taught me for a few years, and I always thought it was the most amazing thing. And it goes back even further than her, because she had just started to get reacquainted with the church after being absent for a while. It was going back to my dad's grandmother and his mom. His mom was the Sunday school church director at their church, and his grandmother was the children's church director.
Wow.
So it's kind of always been in the blood that you've got this children bring out the best, and you see God through them the most.
Mm-hmm.
And to be connected to them, whether it be in a leadership position or a shepherding of helper position, you just see God move. And it'll be temporary because they grow and they keep growing.
Yep.
But you see them at different stages of your life, like you see everyone. And it's just so amazing to see. And I love that about them. I love seeing kids that are now kindergarten, first graders just go and grow in Jesus.
That's really exciting. Kids, the classic, the kids are the future. So it is always good to see that. And I have a background in education originally. That was something that was always so funny to me, is people would be like, "Oh, so you want to do Sunday school, right? You want to do Sunday school?" And it's so funny that, like, whereas one part of me that was such a truth of my life is like, yeah, I love teaching kids, love doing stuff with kids, but that wasn't ever really a passion of mine. But I think part of it was I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't have that background. I didn't see the fruit of what that could be, just a strong children's church, the services, the stuff for the children. I'd not really seen that in some churches I'd been to. It was all very... The stuff that I did see wasn't necessarily always the most Christ honoring. It'd be like, color this picture of David because you want to be strong like David. And I'm like, and I look at that now as an adult and be like, actually, no, I don't want to be strong like David. David actually wasn't strong. He did some bad stuff. It's like, I want to be strong like Jesus, who David is pointing me that he's not strong enough. Only Jesus is strong enough. And it's like, only until recently that I've seen, like, right now we both go to Emmanuel Church, and I've recently been seeing some of the children's stuff there that they do, and just the way they teach and the way they do that stuff, and it got me excited. And I was talking to my wife the other day. Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like I was talking to my wife the other day, and I was like, man, I think this might be the first time I've been at a church, and I'm like, well, maybe I do want to serve in children's ministry. Maybe this is the next step for me.
Got a lot of kids. We need the help. So
there's always more kids. But so once again, Audra, thank you so much for sitting down and having this little conversation with me. I'm so glad that, at least for now, you found a good home in Wisconsin, the best state in the country, and you've landed at a pretty good church with good people that really just love God and want to continue to honor God. And I'm glad to be part of that, church family with you. And it's just really funny. It's like our paths just keep crossing within this church family on coincidence. Well, I don't believe coincidences happen. Like, God orchestrates these things, but it's just so fun and beautiful to see the Lord do that. For our listeners at home, that's a big encouragement for you. I hope. I really hope that if you've not found a church home, even if it ends up being a temporary one, maybe you are a person that does have to move quite often for work or whatever it is. I pray that you find that church home, because that's where you'll find like some real family. Like, you'll always have your blood family, but you'll also have those brothers and sisters in Christ. No matter what you're going through, the good times, the bad times, they're there for you. They'll always be there for you. Find a church home today. If you don't have one, I really encourage you. I've had seasons of life where I've kind of just hopped around from church to church, and it's so much more comforting when you have that place that's more of a home where you're connected to people, where you can show up on a Sunday and, the classic Cheers intro is like, everyone knows your name there. I'm at a church now where that's not true yet, but I hope someday to know enough people to where a lot of the people I run into will know my name, that I can sit and just praise Jesus with them, talk about my week with them, and all of that. And audience, as always, thank you for listening. I couldn't do this without you. Goodbye.